Michael, nice to have you in the mix on an eventful week that has included a number of odd and extreme nominations
Yeah,
to Trump's cabinet.
I want to continue forgetting about politics as I can.
Yeah, and politics is a weird place right now.
Yeah.
And it seemed, in you looking at RFK Jr.'s history, we just have a big chunk on RFK, and we've essentially dropped it into your segment. So you'll forgive us for concentrating a little bit on that at the beginning. I really wanted your thoughts on this because RFK Jr.'s history makes him a bit of a strange bedfellow for Donald Trump on one level, and yet because he has worked so far outside the margins, maybe you could say that, you know, you see where the two connect. And because Donald Trump doesn't really care, it wouldn't seem, a whole lot about policy, I'd suggest, that you can get into his world with a combination of sort of flattery and some sort of unorthodox game plan and a following. I think it mattered that RFK Jr. had a following. Do you accept that general presupposition before I go forward?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I think that, and you'll have to pardon the animalia behind me, but I think that, yeah, I don't know what a proper bedfellow. I mean, first of all, I think we say RFK likes being a bedfellow, and that I don't know what a proper bedfellow for the former president would be. Frankly, I don't know who is appropriate other than someone who is loyal or someone who has done something to try and screw over somebody who wasn't loyal. And I think that that's what, that's what his prerequisites are in his hiring. And, bringing attention to having the appearance of wanting to overturn the system is something that has been an MO for Mr. Trump. And I think it continues to be. And, some of these are very provocative selections, but it's also the country has to run properly and healthcare has to be overseen. And it's a department not about ideology, it's about efficacy. And I don't know that that's the right person to lead such a department. I just don't. I have a hard time thinking that there aren't better people out there than someone who is an ideologue on health and has an agenda on health. These are dangerous waters that haven't ever been gone into. And when they have been, the checks and balances of the Congress have stepped in to make sure that it doesn't happen. I see that happening perhaps again.
Yeah. Could you, Albert, run a little bit of the Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel? He was the former White House advisor on health policy. I thought he kind of, there are a lot of people, plus he's bald with glasses, and I have people who are bald with glasses, I have great faith in. I think they have more credibility than other people. So go ahead, please, Albert.
Qualified for the job. He doesn't have management experience. He doesn't understand how science is done. He doesn't understand how the federal government evaluates various studies. He can't actually look at a research paper and look at the data and draw conclusions. And he's about to, they want to give him a $2 trillion department with 80,000 employees that oversees the NIH, the FDA, the CDC, as well as Medicare and Medicaid. That is a bad combination. I should say he does have some ideas that are worth pursuing, such as focusing on chronic illness. 85 to 90 cents of every dollar we spend on healthcare goes to chronic illness. We have to focus on them. They are our big problems, whether hypertension, cancer, diabetes, arthritis, and we have to get our arms around them. And he's right, to improve the nation's health, you have to attack chronic disease. He's also right that we've got to look at ultra-processed foods in the food chain and how they cause obesity in the country and stop that. And we have to get conflict of interest issues out of the review of drugs, devices, nutrition, etc. But then he goes on to vaccines, one of the greatest inventions humans have ever had, where we've saved hundreds of millions of people. It's estimated we've saved 154 million people from vaccines in just the last 50 years. In the United States alone, the childhood vaccines, vaccines against hepatitis and pneumonia. We've saved 1.1 million people in the last 30 years. And he wants to get rid of them. He says he's not going to take them away from people, but he's going to not approve them. He's going to make sure the government doesn't certify them so that they can be reimbursed by insurance companies. And he's going to put a chill in the drug companies from investigating and doing research and development to develop new vaccines. This is right when we're facing an influenza, a potential influenza pandemic with H5N1, and we need to develop new ways of making those vaccines. So I worry a lot about this appointment, as I do about a lot of other appointments. So
there you go. Okay, so that's the drill down, and I thought a good summary of where RFK Jr. might fit into this new role.
Yeah, it's a good summary, and the doctor knows far more than I do about health. But I do know from afar that to give too much credit for where he is in the mainstream undermines a little bit of where he is on the fringe. And the fringe of RFK is what's dangerous about him. It's not unpopular to say that we need to attack chronic disease and prioritize the attack on and the effort and the agenda on eradicating chronic disease. But there are hundreds of people qualified to lead that agency, I would imagine, who are in that same place, who don't want to take fluoride out of the water and don't want to urge people not to get vaccinated. So it's what's dangerous about Kennedy that is alarming. It's not necessarily what is, in fact, mainstream about Kennedy, because he does have what are considered some mainstream opinions on health and medicine and prioritization of those. But that's not what the focus should be on. I just want to say that, with a hat tip, a Rangers cap tip to the doctor who knows far more than I about this. The focus should not be, though, equally on where Kennedy is in the mainstream.
This is a really good point you make, because the eradication of a lot of these diseases is dependent on a good inoculation policy and inoculation schedule, and kids are saved from a lot of these crippling illnesses as a result of these inoculations. So,
if we're complaining that we're not doing enough about chronic disease, the other side of your mouth is saying, let's not vaccinate to create more chronic disease and have to spend more on other things and divert our attention and our dollars from the eradication of other disease. Again, I'm not an expert on this, but this makes common sense.
Sure. I think what provides cover for Kennedy is, as you've suggested, some sort of a sane washing of him that is done because you hear him say things like, I look forward to working with the more than 80,000 employees at HHS to free the agencies from the smothering cloud of corporate capture so they can pursue their mission to make Americans once again the healthiest people on earth. That corporate capture, the references to big pharma, to big ag, these are things that people can hear and go, oh, yeah, that's right. I mean, this guy's going to take on big pharma and big ag. The problem with big pharma, let me just say quickly, is not that big pharma does a lot of bad things, and they may, in their experimentation and the way they do certain things in the labs that I have real issues with. But the problem with big pharma is the way that they set up a withering price program for us in America to use these insanely valuable medications to treat these illnesses that we have. It is that we are being pummeled by big pharma in this country on price, okay? That's the problem with big pharma, I'd suggest.
And it goes it goes hand in hand with big insurance too, and that's
thank you. Yes. So it's not, the corporate capture is associated with allowing them to run roughshod over America while the rest of the world gets these medications at discounts. So there's a lot here, and I see RFK Jr. as an insanely problematic figure. And I'm wondering then, if I take a step back, Michael Shure, you see the other Trump appointments on top of RFK Jr. I'll get to Matt Gaetz in a second, because Gaetz, I think, is in a separate category. But Tulsi Gabbard and Trump's other appointments were his former attorneys. I feel like they have connections. They're going to be deputy AG, et cetera. They're going to have roles at the Justice Department that probably are defended more legitimately, you know. But
yeah, those are typical
right,
appointments that any president makes. People that have been close to his inner circle that can be, you know, checks, personal checks on the agencies by whoever the president is. You know, that's fine. You know, you're going to have some loyalists and people who have come up with you and been part of your campaign and your efforts to become president, always involved at that certain level. And this is going to be, you know, a term that's no different.
Does RFK Jr. get through, I guess is what I'm getting to?
I would say my guess is that he will not, but you know, I'm not in I'm in a guessing slump. But I would say that he will not get through because I think that there are enough senators that will talk the president out of this, or you know, the leadership out of this. You have to remember too that the leader of the Senate is now John Thune, a man that came up with Mitch McConnell, that Donald Trump tried to prevent from being the leader of the Senate by sort of boosting the candidacy of Senator Rick Scott of Florida for that job. And a lot of the Trump loyalists tried as well. It didn't work. Thune won. So he's going to be in charge of how these go through and who the committee chairs are that are going to be deciding whether or not to approve these nominees at different phases of that process. But again, you know, then you hear in another breath that he's going to make all recess appointments, and these people will become the cabinet and everybody who ordinarily goes through a Senate procedural vote. That's not going to happen this time. So there are a couple of phases to this as well to see how it gets to the Senate.
Right, and that really is the next thing I was going to get to, because you can't just he has a lot of pressure and he's asking for recess appointments, but you can't just ask for recess appointments. There are aren't there essentially parliamentary restrictions on how you get away with that?
Suspension of the rules, and he can mandate the adjournment of Congress and then make these appointments. So there's a way of doing it. I would imagine that's not going to get him a lot of favor. I mean, Republicans like Donald Trump by and large, and people who are not part of the parties like him, and some Democrats like him. But Republicans on Capitol Hill are a very different lot. The Senate is very proud of the Senate and the power of the Senate, and a new majority in the Senate has a dynamic where they want to be in charge of something, and they're not going to go quietly with this, and it's not going to sort of set a blueprint for success. Now, everybody's got a short memory in politics, and things don't stick to this man, as we've seen with his reelection. But I do think that there will be some institutional bias against going that way, and they're going to fight like hell to not have that happen.
Pete Hegseth, does he get through or not?
He's more likely to get through. I mean, you shroud a lot of these nominees with crazier nominees, and what that does is it makes someone like Pete Hegseth look more appealing than, because Matt Gaetz is in the same conversation, right? So all of a sudden Pete Hegseth is, oh, here's somebody who knows a little bit about the military. He's not a crazy man like Matt Gaetz is. But Hegseth has some baggage of his own, which the Washington Post talked about today. And, you know, there were sexual allegations of sexual harassment, which may have been dismissed. I haven't read into it. But so this is what happens now. The investigative arms of the committees in Congress will go through this, Republican and Democrat, and bring these things up and try and prevent. But, you know, what other people have to realize is if Pete Hegseth doesn't get in, it doesn't mean you're going to necessarily end up with a qualified military man who understands completely our presence.
Yeah, he's going to look farther down the Fox and Friends panel at somebody else who could perhaps run the military. Here's a comment from Extra Line, who writes, I can't see. General Wesley Clark said running military is like running a country: defense, transportation, airports, shipping, supplies, stores, dependent housing, schools, hospitals, banks, post office. Hegseth unfit. Well, certainly that's what I was saying before. I mean, this guy has never managed anything that I can except happy talk on a Fox News panel. I don't see how this guy can be taken seriously. But as you say, and I think it's such a great thing that Michael Shure noted, he's seen in a context which is other nominees. So, okay, you're going to reject RFK Jr., you're going to reject Matt Gaetz, now you're going to reject Hegseth. On some level, you owe a president a thumbs up on some of his nominations, don't you?
Yeah, and he will get them. He's got a majority, and he doesn't have to even appeal to very many Democrats, right? I mean, he's going to lose some. It's going to be a tight Senate, 53-47, probably 52-48, maybe, but probably 53-47. But it's going to take some of these senators to peel away. And I think it's not going to be hard to see Lisa Murkowski certainly step away from Alaska, to see Susan Collins step away. She's announced she's running for re-election again. She's not going to want to have a vote for Matt Gaetz on her record, I would guess, in 2026. There's the other side of that coin is that there may be some Democrats who impress upon, it's deal making that happens in the Senate, who press upon some of the moderates in the Senate and say, listen, we're not going to go along with this, but we'll go along with X, Y, and Z if you vote against Tulsi Gabbard. I'm making that up, or whomever it would be. If you put in legislation that limits the impact that Elon Musk could have on this group. If you, they're all. I keep going, but I think really that it's going to come down to a few of the people that are distasteful, and that those few would be at this point Gaetz, Kennedy, and to a lesser extent even Gabbard.
So let me get to Gaetz now.
Yeah.
The connective tissue between the two, beyond the fact that they're both Trump nominees, may be in this sexual assault thing, which Michael referenced. But this is a big deal.
Well, I referenced it. I referenced it as it pertained to Pete Hegseth. It's a totally different.
I referenced it as the connective tissue. But let me just go back to. Let me double back to the Hegseth thing, because you did reference it, and I think appropriately so. It was so serious, from what I understand, that the Trump attorneys met with Hegseth personally to discuss it. Now, you may say, well, that's no big deal. They just wanted to, okay, big deal or not, it's something that he's going to have to contend with, because it is going to come out in more than just reporting. It's going to be in the news cycle, right, around his confirmation.
For sure it will be, yeah. It becomes part of the zeitgeist of that process. But if the process is avoided, then it becomes about the avoidance of the process and what that means vis-a-vis dictatorship. But I think what Trump has proven effectively is that threats of dictatorship don't bother enough people. That we have to not go with the old models of what could derail this. What could derail this now, in fact, is a couple of Republicans voting against these people, and that might be it. No amount of press, no amount of negativity. He's going to have the support of his media, and he's going to have the support of his voters, and he'll have some of the support of some of the extremes on Capitol Hill who are MAGA people. Where this will be undone is in the middle of the Republican Party, in deal making with people in the middle of the Democratic Party. That's my belief.
Okay, now let me just get quickly to Gaetz, because Gaetz would then run the Justice Department. He'd be overseeing, a bunch of the very department that is investigating him. And in fact, I was mentioning last hour that he would have access to reports on his investigation. The Justice Department did investigate him on the trafficking of an underage woman, of drugs, et cetera. And he'd have access to those who were called upon as witnesses, to offer evidence, and he could follow up in any way he wanted. I mean, he would really be able to master the Justice Department and move it in directions recriminatory or others as he saw fit. He's also a problematic figure, though, isn't he, Michael? Because his world of rolling around with an underage girl and drug abuse and things that will likely be included in this ethics investigation report could mitigate real possibilities of him getting past the Senate. I mean, again, as you say, maybe they have a workaround on that, but senators seem pretty dug in on Gaetz.
They do. I mean, they do because so many of them are former colleagues, or a handful are former colleagues of his in the House. And the worst thing you can be is disliked on Capitol Hill from within your own caucus. There are Democrats who have other Democrats that they can't stand, and vice versa. Those are small, petty things or serious things, but they're not big groups of people. He is very unpopular within his Republican caucus. He is very unpopular with senators who served with him in the House or who know what he did to Kevin McCarthy and have some kind of relationship with Kevin McCarthy. So he is not someone who gets a lot of sympathy from enough people to move forward. That he was supposed to have, the ethics committee in the House was supposed to release a report on Gates today. He was nominated 2 days ago. He resigned 2 days ago. That report is dead because he's not a member of Congress. John Cornyn, who will be the chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the next Senate, is saying that he still wants to take a look at that report from the House. So there's a movement already afoot to make sure that this guy doesn't end up leading the Justice Department. Whether this was a favor that Trump did to get Gates out of Congress and out of that ethics committee report, I don't know. One of his, there are already primary opponents there who are just as far to the right as Gates is, but he is somebody who is a provocateur as well, like Trump. So I think there's a little bit of, compadre that goes along with this as well.
Sure. Mike Johnson is saying today that he doesn't think a House Ethics Committee report on allegations related to Gates should be released. And he is, quote, going to strongly request that the Ethics Committee not issue the report. He called on the ethics panel to withhold the report, and he is pledging to bury it.
He's saying,
go ahead.
The explanation of that is both he's a Trump loyalist and would like to see that Trump gets what he wants and knows that he's fighting for Trump on the Hill. The other thing is the Speaker of the House is always protective of the House, which is really the junior body, the little brother that's always being stepped on by the Senate. So when the Senate comes in and says they want the Ethics Committee in the House to release it to us, it's territorial and protective at the same time. I mean, I'm not saying that's the only reason, but there's a little bit more at play than just he thinks it's a bad idea.
I see. That's the politics of it. It's very interesting to hear you say something which is makes total sense, which is it's important to be liked. I love that you said that because it's politics. It's the P in politics. You need to build coalitions, supporters.
Right.
Does Trump doesn't need that because he has the power now, right?
Yes, he's what will be interesting over the next 4 years, if we want to look for things that might be interesting that are not distractions, is how Donald Trump can't run for re-election again, right, by law. And even though people joke about, well, he's going to change, they're not going to have a constitutional amendment change to have Trump run. And if I'm wrong about that, I will shave my head on your air and retire. But the thing about Donald Trump is that people are going to have to start navigating away from him and learning how to do that successfully as well, because there is a next chapter for younger members of Congress and younger senators in a post-Trump world. So an adherence to everything he says as gospel is going to be a difficult road to navigate. It's not going to happen early, but it's going to be one of the evolutions over the next 4 years, probably 2 years going into the midterm elections.
It's interesting in that context to hear those who are playing the game now, like Tommy Tuberville from Alabama.
Right.
He is, of course, all Trump all the time, foot on the floor. Let's get all of President Trump's appointments through. He said, you're finding all the swamp creatures coming out right now. Everybody's got an opinion up here. But at the end of the day, President Trump was elected by an enormous vote, and he deserves a team around him that he wants. It's not us to determine that. We've got 53 votes in the Senate. We can confirm with 51. First of all, I wouldn't say it's an enormous victory. I mean, he did win, and it was surprising.
The margin is smaller. It's getting smaller every day, but he won.
Yeah.
And it's a red map right now. And whether he won each of those states by a fraction, so too did Joe Biden in some of those states. So it was a decisive victory, even if it was not a landslide by any means or a mandate,
Sure.
but won. But Tuberville is not the place to go for information about what's going to happen. He's not sort of one of the bright lights of the Senate. I would look into how John Thune operates the leadership of the Senate going forward. I think he's going to be looking to 2029 much more than he's going to be looking to 2025 in terms of what the Senate will look like, what their opinions and their posture will be. He's a get along guy. I mean, people like John Thune, and I think that if the direction of standing up to the White House is one that he finds at certain times to be prudent, he's got enough people who like him. He was elected pretty decisively, even though there was a move to not have him become the majority leader. So he's going to be a very interesting political figure over the next, I would say, 2 years.
Tell me about Tulsi Gabbard.
I don't know. She's a very fascinating and interesting figure. I covered her in Iowa when she was running for president. Spent a couple of days with her. She's been very progressive. She's also been her lineage, her father was kind of a strange guy. She has very out there opinions on, everything from UFOs to, if I'm not mistaken, to also vaccines. And she really had a bone to pick with the Democratic Party because she was trying to be a bit of a maverick and she wasn't welcomed, and Nancy Pelosi gave her a hard time. As a matter of fact, Nancy Pelosi, whether you like her or not, one of her great accomplishments objectively was keeping her caucus together in the first Trump term and not having defections and those sorts of things. It wasn't working for Tulsi Gabbard, so she left. And so I think that she's someone who doesn't like to play along, and there's nothing wrong with that. But in politics, you have to do that sometimes. So she's ended up in a place that when she was first elected from Hawaii to represent, I think it's the 2nd district of Hawaii, she was, this would not have been predictable in the way she talked about the environment. I mean, she's going to an administration that wants to drop out of the Paris Accords and forget climate. And that's not the tune that she has sung in the past.
And she, of course, got even more controversial as she met with Syrian President Assad.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there were those things that she did. She sort of had a renegade foreign policy tour.
Exactly. I think she's dined out a bit on that. I mean, she's been something of a darling to the right. She's had a show on Fox News Channel. Not that that is necessarily a litmus test in any way, but it certainly would suggest that she's drifted a long way from those Democratic primaries that we're talking about.
There's a little bit of a "how do you like me now" part of her personality, and look, I mean, on paper she's not unqualified for a job. She's it's great to have a woman in that job. It's someone who's a military veteran. It's someone who's well versed on a lot of these things. But when you take the whole of who she is and how her public persona has been and what her kind of enigmatic opinions and positions have been, she becomes a little less. You feel less secure about it, but there will be enough on Tulsi Gabbard where by the end people will have be able to form opinions on what the record is, assuming we have a normal process of confirmation.
Well, she is a spy, says Angie Bear. I mean, she's being viewed as a Russian asset, either a willing Russian asset or an unwilling Russian asset by many. Because she does, she offers up some Russian talking points, which is sort of,
She does. If spies were supposed to be covert, she's not doing a good job. But I take your viewer's point seriously. That's true.
Michael, we love you. I don't know why my camera has all of a sudden decided to go away. Am I back now or not?
There you are.
There's a really weird thing going on today with our software. Is it software? Is it hardware?
Malware. Now I don't see you at all.
I'll join you. Hi.
Hi, Ken.
Yeah, I think he might have removed himself from the lobby.
I mean, there are. So I see someone on the screen saying she's 1,000% unqualified. Yeah. I think that they'll get there. I mean, if that's the truth, they'll get there. She does have some of the bona fides of military and intelligence, but I understand. I would never argue with someone who says that she's unqualified, but that's what has to come out.
Here's a quick around the horn on comments. Hello, Mark and Kim. Reason for RFK is for him to hire and then fire a Kennedy. He is jealous of them going back many, many years. I had not heard that. That's from Prop Man 415. Anything to that? That's
You
the
know, I don't know.
yeah.
There are funny things to take. Look, I don't know. I don't know why he was happy and he thought it was a victory to have wooed Kennedy into his campaign, and that kind of helped his win. And those are the people to whom you usually owe things to. I don't know that Donald Trump doesn't seem to be a great student of history and probably doesn't know very much about. If you asked him what the Poor People's Campaign was, and what RFK Jr. did in his race in 1968, I would guess that you would have a difficult time getting good answers on it.
Yeah.
I have one for you. And this just to me shows that they have no shame whatsoever. Florida Senator Rick Scott is backing RNC Chair Laura Trump now to replace Marco Rubio in his Senate seat should he be confirmed in that cabinet post. He said the Trump's daughter-in-law would do so well as a senator and represent Floridians well. Really?
Right. As a non-Floridian,
What is happening?
I mean, that's what's so absurd, right? It's Donald Trump was vocal and supportive of Rick Scott's Senate run for leadership. This is a nice way of saying thanks, Mr. Future former president. It's strange politics because these are not the types of people. And look, I think Ron DeSantis will probably appoint someone like Byron Donalds to that Senate seat and not Laura Trump. He gets to appoint someone to that Senate seat, and that person automatically becomes the favorite. And I would imagine that Ron DeSantis would not be looking towards Laura Trump right now. They don't have a good relationship, DeSantis and Trump, at last look, but those things don't last either.
We had a question earlier about what happens to Matt Gaetz if he, for some reason, doesn't get confirmed or recess appointed to be AG. He's already resigned his position.
Yeah.
Can he rescind his resignation, or does the governor reappoint him, or does he just SOL and out of a job?
You can't be appointed to a House seat. There has to be a special election, so it remains as a vacancy. And that also plays into the House majority a little bit, because some of these people are coming from the House who are being appointed to positions in the administration, Gaetz as well, and that's a vacancy right now. My guess is that he might run for governor at some point, or if Pete Hegseth is confirmed, then there's an opening that he could be appointed to at Fox News. So he's somebody with a lot of charisma and someone who people in that world like seeing. So he's not going away, I promise you. And he's not an impact politician. He is not someone who has presented a lot of legislation. He's been a disturber and a rabble rouser. And, he could do that from a different pulpit, making more money than he can representing Florida's 1st District.
No Contendo says, as a black man, there are too many DEI hires in the Trump cabinet. That's a great one.
Well, I mean, the diversity is what you make of it, right? I mean, it's finally we're seeing unqualified people in cabinets. That's diverse, isn't it?
You waited for it. Now you've got it. Find him across TYT and the magical. Are you still on? You're not still on Twitter, or are you on Twitter?
I'm there, but I'm on Blue Sky too, for whatever that's worth.
I know I'm starting up on Blue Sky. I don't even know how to work it yet.
But I'm Michael Shure at both of them. But
okay, Michael Shure, Shure. Find him here on Fridays. Michael, thank you for being with us. Always love seeing you. Michael Shure, everybody. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.